Hi guys, I'm Dana Al-Hanbali and this is Something to Consider. Today's conversation is one I've been sitting with for a while, especially as an Arab and an Arabic speaker, because it starts with something really small, almost every day, and quietly opens up into something much bigger. What happens when you realize that something as fundamental as your child's relationship with their own language isn't forming the way you thought it would? Do you accept it or do you take responsibility for it? Because I think what's uncomfortable about that question is that it doesn't sit with our children. It sits with us. Language, identity, discipline, these aren't things you can actually outsource. You can try, but eventually they find their way back to you. And sometimes the things we think we're teaching our children are actually the things they're forcing us to confront in ourselves. My guest today is Reem Madkour, aka Iyad and Karim's mom and the co-founder of Dardasha. Yes, that Dardasha, a platform rethinking how children engage with Arabic, not just as a subject, but as something lived, spoken, and felt. But what I find most interesting is that this didn't start as a business. It started with a very personal realization. How do I give my child something I'm not fully connected to myself? And maybe that's where the real conversation we're having today. Now, Reem isn't just a guest. She and her beautiful little family have quickly become an extension of mine. Reem, welcome to the show and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Dana. I'm so happy to be here. And wow, what an intro.
Do you think it's relevant? Do you find that it connects to your purpose when you think about Dardasha?
Oh my, 100%. I love everything that you said about it really starting at home. And, I don't like to make parents feel like this crushing, debilitating pressure. Mm. But the reality is that responsibility does really start with us. And we shouldn't be afraid of it. But through awareness and through conversation and really understanding the implications of the decisions that we make, we can be reasonable in those decisions in terms of our capacity, our availability, everything else we have going on in life. But as long as we're kind of aware of the implications of those decisions, then we can make informed decisions. And I think that really makes such a big difference.
I think that's so well said. And I think what's interesting and what drew me to Dardasha before I had the pleasure of meeting you and your family was that your story and your cause very much reminded me of myself, my life, what I struggled with. Not because we weren't an Arabic-speaking household, but because I grew up in kind of a similar context of it was between an Arab country and the United States. And my entire education was always in the private school system, whether it was British or American. So naturally, in my learning journey, Arabic always came second. And I feel like a lot of what you preach in terms of what you've tried to build in Dardasha with your co-founder / husband / my new friend, it's almost a reflection of that. It's a reflection of kind of the struggles of being in that context.
100%. And I think that's what has been so beautiful about this journey is that both it's been a bit of a journey of self-discovery, but along the way, we've also had so many incredible and insightful conversations with our customers. We're very close to our community. And that relatability and people being like, I know I've always been so intimidated by Arabic, just made us realize that what we're creating ultimately is this like niche, safe space for people to build confidence in Arabic. And through building confidence in Arabic, then allowing that door to be open for their children to experience it too. Whereas maybe like your experience, which is very similar to mine, we might have been very quick to kind of write off Arabic as something that we want to transfer to our children just because it was either too hard or didn't feel accessible or didn't feel fun or that we're not qualified. Like there's like almost like a baseline qualification for you to be able to teach your children Arabic,
100%.
But it's been such a beautiful journey because along the way we've also heard parents be like, I didn't think I could do this, but I've decided to try. Or it's healing me in the process. And it's such a beautiful experience. And you realize that when you're working in the children's space, you really have two customer bases. You have the parents and you have the children. And we're so intentional in how we design our products because we really want to connect with both. We don't want to design products that only parents think are really, flashy and glitzy and glammy and like are attracted to buy them, but then the children don't actually use. And we don't want to, create products that children are really excited about but aren't resonating with the parents, or that parents feel like it's such a chore or they have to, I mean, I've been in that position before where my child has picked a storybook that I'm not totally enthusiastic about reading to him. And it's always that story that he wants to read like 20 times. So we're really conscientious about like all the different touch points from the beginning of the purchasing journey all the way to it becoming really part of the family.
I think you said something incredibly important, and that this in itself is a journey that has the potential to be healing. And one thing I did not mention, that you and Nabi, your co-founder, are also co-founders of the Arab Child Summit with Dima Al-Alami. And I think what's beautiful about the creation of that, along with so many other things that you are doing, is that it also opened up a space for Arabs that are not necessarily, for example, I don't have children. We're not exactly mothers or fathers. We're aunts, uncles. We're part of the extended nuclear family. And we do have a role to play in the raising of our children because it takes a village. And I think that's so important to say because I feel like that is very healing for someone like me and for, I'm sure, many other people.
Yeah, there isn't anything quite like raising a child or helping to raise a child to really highlight your own kind of insecurities or own, I don't know, like and like it really makes you introspect. And so maybe, existential questions that you've otherwise suppressed suddenly are surfaced and you're kind of thinking, there is بحسها أمانة, like you're raising the new generation and it really makes you question, how was I raised? What did I like? What do I wish was done differently? Where do I want their experience to be different than mine? Or what experiences did I really appreciate in hindsight that I want to recreate or replicate? And like, it's a beautiful journey if you allow it to be a beautiful journey. And again, I think it just starts with that intentionality and thinking about these questions and what do I want for my children.
I'd like to take a step back and get to know you, or have our audience get to know you a little bit more. What context of your life can you give us to kind of set the stage for the conversation we're about to have?
So I'm Egyptian Palestinian, and I was raised in Saudi. And obviously, like very similar to the UAE, it's a residency system. So already you can kind of start to feel a little bit of that story of belonging. And obviously the Palestinian side of me also, I think, the Palestinian diaspora is always kind of feeling that like yearning for home. And then I graduated from high school and I moved to the US for college. In Saudi, I was in British schools. So my entire education was in English. I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and at home with my siblings, we were predominantly speaking English. My dad, Allah yarhamo, he came from like a small village in Egypt, like Ibn Fallah, like to the core, and was so proud. And he went to study medicine in the UK. And I think, he didn't talk about it much, but you could tell that there were probably a lot of incidents of racism or discrimination that really shaped how he views things like being able to speak English with a perfect accent and without an Arabic accent. And so what I found after he passed, Allah yarhamo, from my mom, was that there was a period where he actually like he had forbid Arabic speaking at home because he wanted us to perfect English. And, my mom was like, Ya Munir, like the kids don't know how to speak any Arabic anymore and like they can't engage with the family. And I think by the time he realized how it was impacting our ability to, for example, connect with family, or when we go to Egypt in the summer, being able to communicate with our society and community, it was kind of a little bit too late. And I think that's really what has driven us to focus on the 0 to 6 age group, and to really petition and raise awareness on the kind of those critical years where language is forming and where identity is forming. Because it really sets the foundation and sets the stage for a lifetime of speaking, of communicating, of expressing yourself. So obviously then came like the home tutors and 100 other kind of strategies to rectify the situation we found ourselves in. But at that point, the relationship with Arabic has already been damaged. And it's a really difficult, it's not impossible. Bilax, like, I hope that this also doesn't sound dissuading to parents who are maybe further along in the journey and now have to course correct, but it is much harder. And so that's why a lot of our effort goes into kind of raising awareness on the importance of those early years, and really capturing parents and families in the beginning of that journey so they can set the intention, have clear goals in mind, and then have the resources available to implement those goals and really build like a solid foundation from the beginning.
Wow. And just out of curiosity, especially because you were in a private school system and then you spent your college years in the States, this preconception of what speaking perfect English did to you, did you still consider yourself kind of proudly Arab and kind of stand by that? Or did you feel like that kind of thinking also put you in a position where you had to acclimate to kind of that Western identity that makes us more socially acceptable? I mean, I say this very frankly, this is something we were all taught, especially our generation. So I'm curious how you saw your own identity during that time.
Alhamdulillah, I was always very like proud of my identity as an Arab, but I think that there was an element of, especially like post 9/11, where if you're the only Arab in the room or the only Arab at the company, you almost start feeling like you're the spokesperson and representative, and you feel like you have to show them like, you know, I'm Arab, but look, I'm super like open-minded or westernized. And so I'm
one of the good ones.
Exactly. Yeah. And like, you don't realize how much your mind has been colonized until, you know, you have this like awakening. And I think probably my true journey of like unlearning and relearning and reconnection started after Nabi and I got married. And, you know, Nabi's connection to the language and to his identity was much stronger, I think. Maybe a combination of either his schooling experience, his home environment. He was much more proficient in Arabic. I think another benefit that I've found as an adult when you can speak the language is you can consume content in that language. You can read books by Arab authors. You can listen to podcasts or news sources that are by Arab for Arab, you know, and that makes all the difference, because now you're getting your narrative and you're getting your history and you're forming your opinions from people who actually understand who you are and what you've been through. Whereas a lot of what I was consuming was a westernized interpretation and like, or, you know, which is, I guess, the core of Orientalism, you know? And so it becomes a very like existential process, where you realize that this whole time I've been forming opinions about the world, about myself, through someone else's lens. But now I want so much more than that for my children. And that begins with language, because truly, language is such a core part of identity. And so we're not just, you know, and that's, I think, how the Arab Child Summit also was such a natural offshoot to Dardasha, because we're not here just trying to teach your children the ABCs. Like we're here trying to really connect with them and have them fall in love with the language, which then is the gateway to them falling in love with who they are and their identity.
I think that's so beautifully put, and that's why I love saying it's about تحفيز اللغة العربية, because it's reiterating this idea that the Arabic language has a space, a valid, entitled space in our society. And I think a large part of that is about us also reclaiming that as an idea and being very intentional about the way we do it, because it's so much more than learning our ABCs and learning grammar. It's about integrating it into every aspect of our lives, from our signage in our streets to the books that you read at night, to even the conversations about feelings and how your day went. Which takes me to a point I'd like to kind of touch on. What's interesting about your journey, Reem, usually when people tell stories like this, especially when it comes to, they want their children to love Arabic a lot more, there's almost a foundation that already exists with the parent because of their own schooling. And I think what makes you incredibly relatable is that there are so many of us that are like you that got to a space, in our 20s, 30s, where we felt like we have catching up to do. Mm-hmm. And what I find interesting about your story is that you were that Arabic speaker that felt like she had catching up to do, yet you had a child who entered the school system, the private school system, knowing more Arabic than English. And I'm very curious, how were you able to do that? Because that's pretty incredible. It's usually the opposite. They go in knowing English quite well because English is what everyone speaks. It's how you connect to everyone. But your child struggled with English and not Arabic. So how did you accomplish that?
How did we get here? Remind me to circle back to the imposter syndrome along the way. But first of all, I can't take full credit for it. Akid, having Nabi and our incredible nanny as well at home speaks Arabic, that was a huge help.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. She speaks both English and Arabic, but enough Arabic that we were able to request of her that any interactions that she had at home with Iyad were in Arabic. And it was COVID. He was 1 year old. So that's kind of peak language transformation, development. And we were able to spend a lot of time. But again, I want to go back to the intentionality. We had made a decision as a family that we were going to only speak Arabic at home. So that's how it began. And that meant that all of almost when Iyad was young, I would say 90% of all the books in our home were Arabic books.
Wow.
Our excursions were Arabic focused, play dates. I'm not going to lie, I may have influenced his friendships to lean more heavily towards children who also came from Arabic speaking families. We were intentional to every level in terms of maximizing his Arabic exposure. The music we listened to, once he started getting some screen time, the apps or the TV shows, everything we focus on it being in Arabic. So that really outsourced a lot of the learning or the gaps that I had in my own Arabic proficiency to teach him. بس غير هيك, other than that, him being young enough, when they're at the beginning of their language journey, they don't need much. They need very basic phrases. They need some, of the most common vocabulary. And that, with some Googling, wherever I didn't have that vocabulary, I was able to make up the difference. And that's where I was saying, if you're willing, you can take this journey with your child. And actually, it's the most beautiful opportunity because it's more or less self-paced. There isn't this, you're inviting parents not necessarily to go on a TV interview and immediately switch to perfectly fluent Arabic. You're with a child who's incredibly forgiving and is not going to judge you if you mispronounce something or use the incorrect grammar. So being open to that experimentation, rewiring your brain to defaulting to Arabic. So for the first 4 years of his life, it felt awkward talking to him in English. I had rewired my brain to only speak to him in Arabic. And then books. The more you read, truly, in every language, you learn so much about a language through reading. You learn vocabulary, you learn sentence structure, you learn grammatical rules without necessarily being taught them formally. But when you hear a sentence in English and you're that sounds awkward or that doesn't sound quite right, you can develop all of those skills in any language, including Arabic. And so our commitment, we would read like 3 books every single night. So you're talking about 1,000 books by the time he's a year and a half old. That is a lot of language exposure. غير, like other than like this, the music and the conversation, like if you're intentional about it, you can create such a language-rich experience and environment for your children that you're no longer teaching them the language. You're just creating experiences for them. And that is where you can start focusing on creating positive experiences so that you can build positive associations with the language. Yeah. Exactly.
So talk to me about the challenge of that, the imposter syndrome. Was it ever a barrier for you, or was it just something you knew you had to work through?
So it was a barrier for me because while on this journey myself and with Iyad, I was also starting Dardasha. So we had launched our Instagram page, and I'm positioning myself in a market that, by the way, was zero entrepreneurial like experience. I'm an engineer by trade. I studied engineering and art in college, but it was a problem-solving experience for me, which I guess, most entrepreneurship journeys start with identifying the problem. So 100%. I had identified the problem, and now I was designing the solution. But I had no business background. I didn't understand what it meant to run a business. But this is where Nabi is like, honestly, alhamdulillah, the best co-founder I could have ever asked for. Like, Ghairan, he's my husband. Like, if he wasn't my husband, like, I would still choose him to be my co-founder, Because what he brings, like, he came from a corporate finance, private equity background. He had been in the startup world for a few years. He actually left the corporate world when I was pregnant with Iyad. So he has that background in business building, in strategy, in finance, like financial planning. I learned on the job. So with the absolute best mentor and coach alongside me, so we're like, what we bring to the table is so different that we were able to really complement each other in terms of that building process. But the imposter syndrome was like, when I'm on social media, I was hyper like self-conscious about captions, or if I'm posting a story and I'm writing in Arabic on the story, am I spelling things correctly? Am I using the proper grammar? And I would send them to, Nabi and his sisters, like, can you guys just check, am I writing this correctly? And it was I felt like I was pretending to be someone who speaks Arabic on social media because I wanted to appear credible to the encouraging of teaching Arabic. But at some point, I'm like, I cannot maintain this. Like, this is not sustainable for me. It was slowing me down to have to get approvals and reviews. And I'm like, I just want to be myself. So I did this like big reveal, but like, guys, like, I have to come clean. Like, I actually am not great at Arabic. And actually the influx of messages that I got from people being like, oh my God, this is actually so relieving to hear.
It's refreshing.
And it's refreshing and it's relatable. And like, thank you for being so honest about it. Like, I'm in the same boat. And that's what's kind of been holding me back from even beginning this journey with my child. I realized that like, I'm actually doing the community a big disservice by pretending that I've figured it all out. Actually, what I'm going to do is take them on this journey with me. And that's kind of how our Instagram page started. It was really, me as a mother on this language journey with my son to learn Arabic and to create products along the way and use these products real time with my child as like, I call him like our first guinea pig. And kind of, the rest took off from there.
It's so inspiring to hear. I know this story, but I still get inspired because I feel like, especially as an Arab, one of, I think, the biggest barriers is that this idea of your level of Arabness is almost gate-kept by whatever culture you're surrounded by. And we forget that we are 22, 23 different Arab countries with different dialects and different dialects that have evolved over time and we've taken from each other because of immigration and exchanging culture and travel and visiting. And it frustrates me because this barrier of people making it seem like you need to be Arab enough for what you say to be valid or credible. I think that is our biggest barrier as to why so many people in the Arabic speaking community are not speaking Arabic, because there's more of a concern over getting it wrong than just doing what should come naturally and trying. I commend you on that so much. I'd like to take a step back and talk about you. I love the way you referenced kind of the value that your co-founder Nabi brings into this. But when we think about Dardasha, what do you feel like what was the gap it was addressing at the time? Like, where do you feel like you guys were really able to come in and add something that didn't exist?
For starters, like, I don't call Dardasha a publishing house anymore. You know, I feel like we have evolved so much beyond that, because, I mean, a traditional publishing house is that you're publishing books by different authors, different illustrators. For us, we wanted to teach life in Arabic, you know? So we started with our books, and then that naturally evolved. And then I want resources. I want toys. And then we started our toys line. And then, you know, we recently launched like a banner. So I'm now looking just at all language exposure elements around the house. You know, birthday banners, Eid banners, Ramadan banners, calendars, all of these sources of language, and then creating products in Arabic that can fill those gaps. But I think ultimately what I feel like we do really well that wasn't necessarily done enough is that we're making it really fun. Like, for us, I honestly, like, if your child still by the end of, you know, reading our books is talking to you in English, I don't care. But are they happy? Are they enjoying this? Are they feeling connected? Are you bonding over, like, that is more important to me than them having acquired a new vocabulary word, because they're getting that exposure. And whether or not they're ready to use that vocabulary, it's getting stored in their brain. And we know that when they feel there's a need, it will be there and it will be ready for them to use. And that's okay. We don't have to pressure them right now to immediately switch to Arabic. But what I'm always working on is just that positive association, the connection, and at a very minimum that they don't absolutely hate. Like, when you talk to them about Arabic, that they don't like cringe or feel like it's something that is just so disconnected from them.
Yeah, I think that's such a great way to kind of sum up what makes you guys different. And before we get too philosophical, I want to interject here, because you brought something, but I also want to preface this with a mini story. The way that Reem and I connected, or the way that I invited myself into her family, was I fell so in love with her children, mashallah, Allah yahmiyon. I fell so in love with them that I messaged her and asked if I could come over and hang out with them. And I think at this point we had only met like once or twice. I had participated in the Arab Child Summit. I was a moderator for a panel. Like, it was a very superficial relationship. And I wanted to be part of this world that you created with your kids. And there's a specific reason why. There's a magic that comes to it. So what I'd like you to do, you brought your Dardasha box that includes products that I want to talk about, but before that, there's a letter in there.
Yes.
And before you read it, I'd like you to give some context as to how that letter was written. And small note, I'm sure a lot of parents can relate to this. Your first child, Habibi Iyad, was 1 or 2 years old during COVID. And now Kareem, her second son, is 1 or 2?
2 years old.
2 years old. So what's interesting about both of them at this phase in their life, they experienced distant learning.
Yeah.
And something very interesting came from that. So please tell us what's in the box.
So, you know, with distant learning, Iyad's kind of been asking to be homeschooled for a while, which I don't even know where that idea originated from. I think he likes us.
I definitely agree.
And he just like craves like spending more time together. But also he's so curious about his own topics, you know? So I think for him, traditional learning has been in some ways challenging, because it kind of, it does force you to kind of go with the flow and to accept the information that is being offered to you through the curriculum and to work within the constraints of a larger classroom setting with other children. And so when we switched to distant learning, for him, he was like, yes, this is amazing, and it actually was a blessing in so many ways. Like, I know it was an incredibly difficult time for a lot of families, and there were challenges for us too. I think obviously the fact that we are entrepreneurs and we own our own business, we work from home, so we had a little bit more of that flexibility. So we really kind of embraced this as an opportunity to get to know Iyad, not as just our son, but as a student, and it gave us a lot of context and insight on maybe what he's experiencing at school and what his teachers are experiencing with him as well. He's very chatty, by the way.
And he's very articulate.
Yes. And so, when we had to break the news to him that school was going back to in person, and there was a bit of a heartbreaking moment, and I was like, well, why don't we sit and talk about all the things that you wish could be replicated kind of in a school setting that you really enjoyed at home, and let's write that down, and then let's go have a conversation with the school to see how maybe they can offer a few of these things to you. It was a really nice opportunity for him to also understand the value of advocating for yourself, that you cannot get if you do not ask, and that you don't always have to settle for the status quo or what's being offered to you. Like, you can dream. You can dream about what you wish you had, and you can have those conversations to see how they can be incorporated. And alhamdulillah, his school is actually amazing. We had the meeting with them, and we went through his list of demands.
But see, this is key, because this is a 7-year-old child. He's very adamant that I get that right. This is a 7-year-old child who grew up in a home where he felt safe enough when he wanted something, when he wanted to change something, when he had questions about something, to go to his mother. I swear he could have been raised in my house too. This is a very basma sha'ar way of raising a child. But maybe that's why I also love you guys so much. But please share with us a few of his demands that he instructed you to share with the school.
Let's see. He said, I'm being taught phonics when I already know how to read, which, is fair. They have to do phonics every day, and mashallah, Iyad is quite advanced as a reader. And so, again, we went to the school and we were like, does he really have to sit and do the phonics if he already is quite advanced, as quite an advanced reader? And they're like, actually, no, it doesn't make sense for him to be doing phonics. Why don't we find other things for him to be doing during that class time? It's kind of a individually paced lesson anyway, as opposed to a group activity where he'll be learning collaboration and teamwork. So that already has been implemented, and such an easy win.
Bravo, Iyad.
Anjad, bravo. Things that I otherwise was going to kind of just let slide. But the way he was talking about learning and about education is really what kind of raised all these red flags for me, because he was all like, I don't want to, but I have to. Or I already know everything, which no, انت ما ختمت العلم. There's a lot for you to learn. And so that kind of talk and conversation was really what caused me and Nabi to kind of pause and be like, no, there's some infrastructural issues now that we have to address. And if we leave these issues unaddressed for too long, it's going to shape his entire relationship with education. Another fun one is, why is chess club only for year 4? And shouldn't anyone who has a chance at a checkmate be given a chance to at least try?
Ya habibi. Ya habibi.
So I'm happy to announce, and they went and they bought him a storybook about chess.
Oh my God.
And will be, I think, either forming a new chess club for the younger students, or giving them a chance to join the year 4 chess club and see how it goes.
I love that. Listen, this is why I wanted you to just talk about that list, because I feel like, you talk about Dardasha, and I would love for you to briefly kind of talk to us about the products in the box, but you really are creating something that integrates into life. And I think what's beautiful about Iyad and the way he's being raised by you and Nabi is that he also has a role to play in it.
Absolutely.
Versus where I feel like education in general, I mean, there's always going to be room to evolve. I don't think, I mean, education in itself means that you accept that you will always be a learner. So when we talk about education systems, I feel like we are moving from something that is very much dictated to us of this is how it should be for you to qualify for everywhere in the world, to this idea of, no, it should be adaptable to the people that we're becoming today in today's world. And that's what I find so magical about this. So can you talk to us a little bit about what you guys have?
Definitely. I mean, and I think what you've described is also, actually, Iyad's role is huge in Dardasha.
I know, I call him the CEO of Dardasha, by the way.
100%. Because Dardasha was like, it's actually like, if you look at when we've launched each product, it very much follows like his developmental journey. You know, like Dawman Ma'ak, the book about like separation anxiety, we launched after he started at nursery. You know, Ajsamun al-Mudhila, about like the body parts and functions, is when he started really like becoming curious about like science and understanding like the world around him. The wooden cubes was when he was starting to really learn different forms of the letters and how they come together and phonics and putting them together to form words. And so through our parenting journey, that's really inspiring our entrepreneurship journey. So, I mean, I didn't bring much, but you know, just to show kind of some of the different lines that we have, you know, Kalimati al-Ula, this was like after I was just fed up of having to constantly Google and like translate different words into Arabic so that I could fill in those gaps. It's, you know, very simple, one word, one image per page. But then we went further and we added like the English transliteration under each word, because again, based on feedback from our community, or like our nanny can't read Arabic and we wanted her to be part of that journey. So how can we continue to design products? We're product designers.
Yeah.
Like we want to think of every customer's unique experience and for them to feel like there's a space for them. Can you read Arabic? No worries. It's here. We've enabled you. Be part of this journey.
There's one thing I want to add, because when I realized this, I was over and I was looking at a couple of these books and I found it interesting, like why is there tashkil, which is the accents on top of the Arabic letters? I'm like, aren't they a bit too young to care about that at this age? It's just about getting the word right. And she said something brilliant. She said, this is not for the child, this is to help the parent. This is to help the parent that is also on that journey learning. Reem, I love that. Like the empathy that you show in the products that you've developed for also the parent that is on this journey with the child, that is beautiful. That is so beautiful.
You know, till today, I can't quite read a newspaper because I never developed my reading or my grammatical rules to the extent that I know how to, تشكل or add the diacritics to a word naturally. And that was always a big barrier for me for reading storybooks to Iyad. But other than that, what we also then discovered is once Iyad was able to read Arabic on his own, there was a bit of a full circle moment where he was able to go back to these books and practice his reading using them again. And that's why, you know, when people are like, oh, you know, what age are these books for? I'm like, these books for me, I consider as like almost like encyclopedias. Like they're resources that you use. They're not necessarily books that you're going to sit and read cover to cover. It's not a storybook. It's a reference book. You know, each book is a topic and there's words and there's images. And you're always going to, you know, like, what was the word for dragonfly? And you can go to the insect book and you can find it. You know, it's really it's a resource. This was a nice kind of full circle moment that was really extending the lifespan of a lot of our products once Iyad was able to start reading.
I love that. And how have they evolved? I know you have the encyclopedia of words and colors and different things. You also have something else that you've launched recently.
Well, we have also our country series books. We have our story books. And this is where we started playing with kind of the representation of culture in our books. Like for a child to open, and we wrote this book with Nada Al-Awadi. And yeah. And
So this is Al-Imarat.
Al-Imarat.
Which is beautiful. So it's a book just about Al-Imarat.
Exactly.
Okay.
And, we worked with Nada Al-Awadi, who is an Emirati business owner, because we wanted to make sure that we were representing Al-Imarat Kaman in a very like authentic way. And so like on the page of like Irgag, she was like, one of my core memories was, during celebrations that my grandmother would be making irgag, and we added the little boy and like behind her kind of sneaking a little bite. So it's those kinds of like elements of nostalgia. And we've received messages, for example, from other Emirati families who have been like, oh my God, once we got to the page about the kandura, my son pointed and was like, Baba, Baba, like there are really sweet moments that are coming.
They're reflections of themselves.
100%.
And I think this is another thing to also talk about, because you've done this for Al-Imarat, you've done this for Palestine, you've also done it for Lebanon, correct? Yes. And I think what's beautiful is that sometimes when we talk about Arab culture and heritage, what tends to happen is it becomes kind of a blanket of sameness. Because again, it's written through a very specific lens, when in reality, even within our beautiful Arab nations, there's so much diversity.
Oh my goodness.
And I think it's really important for kids to see themselves in this
100%.
Type of content.
Actually, my favorite part of these books is both highlighting the differences and the similarities. So for example, in the Lebanon and Palestine book, they both had debke, But then you see, for example, the different types of foods that are highlighted are slightly different, or like what they're wearing is slightly different. So it really celebrates the uniqueness of each culture, but also reminds us that like there are threads that connect all of us as well.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. Okay, so let's take a sidestep from Dardasha. What has this experience in building a business like this done for you on a personal level? What do you feel like, you've come, I know you're still on the journey, I'm aware, and I know you're always learning, but what do you feel like you've come out of it with? What has it challenged you to do?
Man, it's been a roller coaster. There's so much that you don't realize about starting a business until you're kind of in it. It requires a lot of grit, a lot of patience, resilience, like there's, like it can break you. It can break you. Like whenever, like, people are like, oh my God, I have a children's book I've always wanted to write. I'm like, great, write it. You don't have to start a publishing house. You can also just like enjoy the writing process, because, there's this idea, like people see the successes and they see the final outcomes, and they don't necessarily see the details on the way. Not to discourage people from starting an entrepreneurship journey, but to really understand that there's really a lot that happens behind the scenes. Actually, probably writing books and product design, which are my favorite parts of the business, are now maybe only 10% of what I do. So there's been a lot of growth and learning along the way in terms of understanding things like cash flow, and working capital, and that it really takes a team. Like you can't do it all yourself, but that's also liberating, because it means you don't have to know everything. So a lot of that imposter syndrome that I used to feel in the beginning, where I would be like to Nabi, like, I don't know how to do this. And he's like, that's okay. You don't have to know how to do this. You just need to understand that there's something you need to know, and then you need to find the person who knows it, and then figure it out. So we have an incredible team working with us, like from editors to language specialists to educators to obviously the entire fulfillment and operations team, marketing, content creation, like the list goes on and on. It's a full operation. And whenever I've gone to Nabi and been like, I don't think I can do this, he's like, you're doing it. Like, you're already doing it. And I'm like, but I just feel like there's other people who are more qualified than me. I'm like, okay, then where are they? Why aren't they doing it? So it really has forced me to kind of reshape how I think about, first of all, what defines success? What defines qualification? what are the prerequisites that I thought were necessary to starting a business that aren't actually required, and that these are things that you can learn and figure out along the way. I think where maybe I naturally excel is obviously with my background in engineering and in art and in design, that process and the team management and the project management of it like comes very naturally to me. But where I have, like, as a type A personality kind of person, where I don't know the answer, it's taught me to not feel like a complete and utter failure for not being able to do everything myself.
That's humbling.
It's very humbling.
You've referenced Nabi so many times in this conversation, which I love. I think that's so beautiful and that's so rare. And I know this for a fact, but I also hear it in the way you talk about your partnership. There's a genuine appreciation for what he brings to the table. And I've seen him say the same about you. Because he is your life partner and your business partner, I'm curious, what do you guys think you got right in terms of the way that you've built your relationship?
Our marriage relationship, or our
your ability to interact? Because I think, look, I know they're different, and I know that there are obviously boundaries, but mashallah, your ability, and I'm not denying that you don't have, I'm sure everyone has problems, but there's a specific dynamic. There's a way that you guys work together, which is very symbiotic. And I'm curious, what did you get right?
I think maybe this is cliche, but really beginning with respect and appreciation, and to value what each person is doing and the efforts that they're making and what they bring to the table. Now, from a business perspective, it really helps that we have such different areas of strength and focus. And so that created a very clear boundary on what roles we play within a business. But, Nabi also is an incredible father, and so he's very hands-on and very involved in everything outside of the business as well. So the opportunities for resentment or the opportunities for miscommunication, I feel like, based on most of the conversations that I've had with friends, and most of that kind of break in communication or break in maybe trust or respect can come from almost like a power dynamic, or feeling like I'm doing more and he's doing less, or vice versa, or I try harder, and reshaping how we think about the partnership, and truly as a partnership, and that you're on the same team. There is no me versus you. That, I think, would be the first step. Truly, it doesn't have to be perfect all the time. We have disagreements. We don't see eye to eye. Maybe there are some days where I've completely dropped the ball and vice versa. But knowing that if that's happening, it's not happening to you, or it's not happening to annoy you or to in spite of you, really being open to the idea of no, we're on the same team. We have the same goals, and we are building this together. And there will be hiccups along the way, but as long as we don't turn this into a but you, but I, but you, but I, it's like a we conversation, then there isn't much you can't overcome.
I think that's so well put. And although it may sound cliche when we talk about respect, I agree 1,000,000%, because I think it's one of the most undervalued things when it comes to relationships. And I think it's the first thing to get taken for granted when a relationship does have friction. We take respect for granted and expect people to kind of take us as we are, even when it becomes a compromise of their boundaries. I would add to that, from what I've observed, is what I think is so incredible about you and Nabi is you make a conscious effort to honor each other. And I say honor, not compliment and be cute and love each other, which, yes, I know you do. But when you honor someone, you make a conscious effort to make them feel like they are being seen, which is really rare. And it doesn't have to just exist in, I think, marriages. I think, honestly, honoring people is what makes for the foundation to better relationships. And it's something I've learned from you guys, mashallah.
Thank you. I mean, I have to give the credit mostly to Nabi here. Like I'm, again, like Badia bil Haya. Nabi is much more like intentional and like centered. And, you know, he always said like, you can't judge a person in their worst moments. You have to always maintain the big picture of like who they are and what they represent. Because otherwise you're going to get lost in these moments of, or these lapses. And like, we all have ups and downs and we all have stressful days that might make us say something, you know, harshly or might make us less patient. But is it fair for the relationship to become defined by those moments, or should we continue to revert back to like, who is this person? What has he done in the past? What are all of the beautiful and positive things, you know, like, so I think that maintaining that perspective as well can really offer a lot of grace. And I think a lot of grace is where forgiveness and love and respect kind of flourish, you know.
So well put. I'd like to have kind of a final reflective question. And take it back to where we started. What do you think Amma Munir would say about what you're doing?
First of all, he thinks I'm a doctor. Because when he passed away, I was like pre-med. So a lot has changed. But you know, it's so funny because I think when you are on this journey, you also like think back and you realize that there's so many signs that led to here. You know, Hatta Baba Allah Yarhamo was such a great storyteller. Like some of my favorite childhood memories were bedtime stories that, by the way, he would make up on the fly. He was not reading any books. He was just such a natural with children. He was also a natural educator. Actually, he was my mom's professor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, you know, a little backstory there. But it shows me, and then I think about my own, you know, childhood, and I was like in summer break, I would always love to create like summer camps for all of my friends in the compound. And like I tutored all through college. So I think there was always that pull for me to like that. I love that transfer of knowledge. I love the challenge of making knowledge accessible and relatable to someone so that they connect with it, and then seeing that moment where they've picked it up or they've mastered it is so incredibly rewarding. And then the creativity, like I think he would be really proud, and I think he would be in some ways involved in what we're doing. At least I hope so. Inshallah.
Habibti. Reem, I usually end my episodes on a final question, one that I ask of my guests. Is there a question you would now like to ask me or give me something to consider?
What do you want to build next?
Wow. I'm building it. I think impact is something that I hold very dear to anything I touch. And I think that's why I'm exhausted all the time, because I really want what I put my time and energy and money into to mean something, and to mean something in the best of ways. Because for me, contribution, I think, is the reason we're all here. And I don't want to contribute in a superficial way. And I hope I haven't. I hope I haven't. So I think what I'm trying to build more now is a space that feels safe and inviting to create in the world of storytelling, whether it's through my podcast or through my company. And I think as a natural extension of wanting to do that, God has sent me the most incredible community, and I feel so lucky. I include you in that, but I just, that's what I'm building.
We're the lucky ones, by the way. Anjad, what you're doing is incredible. And thank you so much for having me and for this conversation.
Thank you for being here. You've given us so much to consider. And I knew this would be something wholesome and necessary. And I feel like I'm walking away with so many insights. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And to all of our listeners, as always, thank you so much for the privilege of your time. I hope you found something to consider.